So with that, I will introduce Kathy Denyer, the CEO of Parks and Recreation Ontario, who's officially going to get us underway. Kathy?
Hi, thanks, and good afternoon, everybody, and thanks, Diane, for bringing this, our very first COVID-19 discussion live webinar underway. I want to begin by recognizing that our work and the work of our members takes place on traditional Indigenous territories across Ontario. We also wish to acknowledge that the offices of Parks and Recreation Ontario are located on the traditional Indigenous territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and most recently the territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We are grateful for the opportunity to work on this land and are mindful of broken covenants and strive to make this right with the land and with each other. We recognize that the past 3 weeks have been very difficult as we have been faced with unprecedented challenges and decision fatigue. Before we even start, we want to acknowledge and thank all of you for your ongoing commitment to our community during this critical time.
I think we have lost Kathy here for a minute, and Vance, maybe that might have been just a little mute that we had there for a second. Kathy, are you back on yet? All right. Since we have lost Kathy there, I will just move us forward and introduce our presenters for today. I apologize for that. We have with us today Dean Hustwick, who is the Director of Community Services for the Town of Cobourg. Sherry Lichterman is the Director of Recreation with the City of Mississauga and also on the Pro Board of Directors. And moderating the show today, we have Jennifer Reynolds, the former Director of Community Services with the Town of Milton and Pro past President and a CPRA past Chair as well. So thank you all for participating today and for lending your expertise to what promises to be a full agenda. We're going to first start by reviewing some feedback that you have given us, our members have given us through a survey that we launched a couple of weeks ago. Then we're going to look at your top issues that we had during this from the survey, which includes communicating. We're going to talk about communicating with citizens and with staff, continuity planning as it pertains to maintenance and service levels that you may be working through right now, staffing and planning for the resumption of services, as somebody put it yesterday, when we raise the veil. So I think that's a full agenda. If we do not get to everything, we will be hosting hopefully some more of these in the future. So I think that's it's going to be a great conversation. And so I am just now going to hand things. No, I'm not going to hand things over to anybody. I'm going to carry on. Sorry, team. So in the Pro survey, we circulated the survey about 2 weeks ago to all Pro members, and it was questions that the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries asked that we send out. The questions were all open-ended, and so we kind of aggregated the responses. And you know, keep in mind that things have changed a lot in the 2 weeks, so some of these responses were reflective of what people were feeling at that time and what people were concerned with at that time. So number one issue was cancellation of programs and the impact that it would have on the community. Also, people were concerned about the impact on staff, such as training, wages, layoffs, morale, having to work from home. Revenue loss was a concern, but not as much as the two, you know, sort of impact more on people, on the people. Certainly grant funding was raised a number of times, and having to follow through on grant deliverables that you may not be able to do to complete because of things shutting down. There was uncertainty around planning, around timelines, all of those things. And other things that people mentioned were a lack of safety materials, disinfectants and masks, communication with the public, and restoring public confidence. So I think that was a pretty good representation of what our members are thinking and how we brought together our agenda for today. We asked what the impact on staffing had been, and most respondents were concerned about layoffs in the near future. Some reported that there had been layoffs already. We didn't ask for detail on that, so we don't know the impact at that point. And again, that was 2 weeks ago. They reported that part-time, contract, and seasonal staff would likely be affected and would be the first to be laid off. And as well, people raised the concerns of working from home and how to keep people and staff busy and engaged during this time. And we asked members what the more medium and long-term effects would be on their organizations. And here where we see is where loss of revenue became the most pressing concern. Obviously, having to refund programs, having to fully refund those fees, not being able to collect permits, and suspension of all services has caused a great deal of disruption to our regular services. Impact on programming is, maybe a long-term impact. Will we have changes in class sizes? Will we be canceling programs in the short and the medium term? And fear. We were all uncertain about what was going to happen. That was and the fear of our citizens. Will they want to come back? Will they want to congregate? Of course, staffing changes, a major concern. If layoffs occur, what will be the rehire rate and how will that affect our overall services? Of course, changes to cleaning procedures and what that means to our overall operation. And a few people were not sure. We also asked for your advice on what we could be communicating to the ministry to support the sector. Some ideas that we could do is to continue funding. Obviously, we're keeping grant requirements open until the state of emergency is lifted, providing virtual recreation programs, and overall support for part-time and student workers. I think that is something we have seen both from the federal government, certainly. Then after the pandemic, some ideas that people came forward with was to create guidelines and increase funds for new cleaning procedures and with required staff training, direct subsidies to recreation programs to ensure that those returning from layoff or from a long time away from work will have the opportunity to participate in recreation, because we certainly know that recreation contributes both to economic recovery but to personal recovery, and also to help reestablish public confidence in the safety of recreation programs and facilities. So what have we been doing over the past weeks? Well, we've been staying in touch with the ministries that we are involved with. That's the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture Industries, under which recreation falls, but also, of course, municipal affairs and education as it affects our authorized recreation programs. So we're in touch with them. They are asking us for advice, and we are contacting them to understand how we can support their advocacy to ensure, especially with the smaller ministry, to ensure that our sector is represented in relief and recovery efforts. We're obviously going to continue to provide information to members that comes from government that is, specific to our sector. So far, there's been nothing specific, but as that comes out, we'll be providing it to you. And we do have a new special communication for Pro members called the Pro Dispatch. It will focus on resources for now and for recovery, as well as providing some free opportunities if you do find that staff are having opportunities to do online training. We're looking for those opportunities so that you can keep staff engaged. We are, of course, hosting this webinar and hope to host more in the future. We are currently exploring new virtual training opportunities, as we know that when the veil is lifted, that we will need to be training a lot of staff, hopefully in a very short time, and we want to be able to respond to that. We're looking at training and resources as the situation evolves that respond to the situation. We're connecting senior leaders across the province so that they can be sharing information and working together. And I'm happy to announce today something that we were going to launch live at the forum is called our Online Knowledge Hub. This is a secure area where Pro members can post information and ask questions of other Pro members. And so it's very easy to get to if you are a Pro member in good standing. You will go to the sign in, which appears at the top. I'm just going to grab my little pointer here. It appears at the top of every page on the Pro website. You sign in, and you'll come to this page. If you have never signed in before, you will use the first-time login. If you have signed in but have just forgotten your password, you can click that link as well. And if you remember your password, username and password, you can sign in. And what you will see when you log into your membership portal is a number of options. You can update your profile. You can look at your membership renewal. And if it is upcoming, you could take that opportunity to renew. You can see any transactions you've had.
Sorry, are you sharing your screen? Because I can't see anything online.
You should be able to see, if you have opened the webinar, you should be able to see the webinar. If not, we are recording it, so you would be able to come back at a later date and look at this.
It says nothing is being shared, and that's what everyone else is commenting in the chat section as well, that there's no video feed and nothing's being shared.
Jennifer and the others, can you see the screen? Just put up your hand if you are not seeing anything.
There are a lot of people saying they can see it, so.
Yeah, I think most people can see it. A couple of people cannot. I apologize for that. I really do. This is a new technology for us. And we have a few people typing in the chat box. You need to ensure that Adobe Connect is installed. If you cannot, you would have to log out and log back in again. Don't lose your phone line if you have gone in on the phone. So what you would need to do is just close your browser and then click on the link again, ensuring that Adobe Connect is installed. So we see lots of people that are seeing it. So again, I apologize and hope that you can get on. Please also check your connection status, which is in the top right corner of your box.
Apologies. Did you say raise your hand if you cannot see the screen? Because that's what I heard.
Yes, if you cannot see. Yeah. So again, my apologies if you cannot see the screen. Try the things that we've suggested, which includes relaunching your browser and ensuring that Adobe Connect is installed. So going back to our Knowledge Hub, this is the area here I have. You'll see it's the second last choice on your profile. If you are a Pro member, you'll be able to click on it. It opens up this screen, and you'll be able to see the COVID-19 forum. You can follow by email. You can choose not to follow by email and just check it on a regular basis. The instructions on how to post and what you can do are in the very first box. So just a quick note that you do have to be a member in good standing in order to view this. And Pro has given a grace period for memberships during this time, knowing that you may not have the ability to process memberships right now. So if you are having challenges and you can't see can't get into the Knowledge Hub and you really want to, and you are and your membership has just recently expired, you can contact our office and we'll be pleased to help you with that. We are working with our technology providers to ensure that we can be as seamless as possible. So I'm going to hand things over to Jennifer at this time to start the discussion on communication with citizens.
Thanks, Diane. First of all, I want to say we'd like to keep this fairly free-flowing. I'm going to be moderating between Sherry and Dean, but as Diane mentioned, we've got the chat box for additional questions and then questions after the various polls. So first topic, communicating with citizens. Municipalities and organizations have spent the last number of weeks putting up required signage and changing their websites as information flow has been changing daily. But how are we delivering the messages of our core services of keeping people active and engaged while also keeping them safe? We know some organizations are using the web, posting fitness videos, downloads, focusing on people staying active but still physically distant. Jerry, starting with you, what are the creative ways you're using to still deliver, as possible, the core business of recreation in your community?
Sherry, I think you're muted.
Oh, first priority, of course, was supporting the citywide messaging about the public education program around coronavirus, and so we've dedicated a lot of resources to that and to ensuring that we're using all of our channels to support messages like the one you see on the screen right now around closure of parks amenities and things like that. And now as we start to settle in a little bit to the new normal, we've turned our attention to using resources like our fitness team to do online and social media videos to keep people active while still being at home, and starting to move into programming for seniors as well that we can kind of do remotely or online. So those are the first few things we've done.
Dean, what about you? In a smaller community, are you able to roll anything out?
Well, like Sherry, I think our focus has certainly been on reestablishing the website for emergency information as well as the social media. We've also established a public hotline for residents to access information. But I think, like many of the issues we'll be talking about today, capacity is always an important consideration for all municipalities, but especially for smaller ones. We've been focusing very heavily on facility closures, cleaning, developing work from home plans to ensure that our staff are as fully engaged as possible, but also cancellations, rebookings, refunds, and another key part that I think we'll probably talk about a little bit later is scenario planning for the months ahead, and then trying to develop startup plans as well for the transition period back to some state of normality. So it's been really hard for us to invest a lot of time in new delivery methods, but we are certainly starting to shift our attention to that.
So thanks for that. I guess to both of you, probably the initial focus was on trying to, well, after the sort of mandatory communication out, but trying to keep people active with the constraints that you're facing. But what about managing social and emotional side of our business? And we know that some organizations are trying to do online chats or one-on-one calls to senior groups, for example. Have you got anything going on there you can share?
So maybe I'll take that first.
Sorry, who's first?
Terry, go ahead.
Thanks. So I would say we're just starting to get into that. We hosted, along with our mayor and council, a call for all of our seniors groups, and we're able to hear from them, some of the needs that they have. Sorry, if everyone could mute.
Yeah, I saw about 6 cars there this morning.
People, we can hear you. We can hear you talking.
Let's do
Someone's
small first thing. Okay. Here's something else, if you're okay. I was kind of conversing back with Kevin about bringing his facility staff, bringing all the indoor plants down to the...
Can we get
there?
them
We go.
muted?
Vance is on it. Vance is on it.
Okay, great. I think one thing, from a staff perspective, we're going to be on a lot of these types of calls for the next months to come, so learning where the mute button is and etiquette is going to be pretty critical. Anyway, so as it relates to isolation and reaching out, I think it applies to both our residents and our staff members. We've certainly reached out to our seniors to get some initial feedback, and there are a ton of groups in the community already doing good work in this area. So our first priority is connecting people with the resources that are already there, and then we'll see if our staff are needed to fill in some of those gaps. Over to Dean.
So we're, smaller communities, my division covers a broad range of responsibilities and departments, not just parks or recreation, but also culture and tourism and events and things like that. So we're looking broadly in terms of how to provide new levels of services that keep people engaged in some capacity and entertained. So we're looking at things like what we're calling Experience Coburg at Home, which involves daily social media posts that include entertainment, informational videos, for example, from the art gallery, interesting local facts and history that can be taken directly into people's homes. And so we're focusing on a lot of the groups that have already performed in Coburg at our concert hall, and utilizing clips and things like that to engage people. We're also reprofiling a series of historic walking tours that we've developed in the past, although as we move forward, walking around town may not be politically correct or appropriate, as people are encouraged to stay home more, but that's something we're reprofiling to provide people with an opportunity, by themselves or in couples to do. We're also looking at utilizing existing technology like GIS to develop a story map of historic landmarks and public art, along possibly with videos. And those are the types of things that we've wanted to do for a long time, so we're now focusing resources on that. Other aspects like supporting Support Your Local campaign to inspire residents to support local businesses and restaurants as much as possible during this very difficult time. And then looking at events, recognizing that might be some time before we have a large event, and people might be hesitant to attend events even once they're created, is virtual events and challenges that people can participate in from their homes, and photography contests and things like that.
Okay. Wow. All right. So at this everybody, if I can ask you to turn your eyes to the screen if you're not already, we're going to have our first poll about what your organization is doing to connect with citizens. You can use the chat box to put in any ideas you want to share. So you can see the polls up. Diane?
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, so I have seen some ideas already coming from Peter Mumford at York University, and so I think we're going to connect with Peter and see if he's willing to share some things with us as well, so we can put out to our out to our members. So we have lots of people that are doing activities for downloads, some social media, and virtual events. One event that I heard of yesterday was they're in Witcher-Stouffville. They have a mayor's bike ride and barbecue at this time of year. So they've put a map on their website so you can do the ride with your family and then have your own backyard barbecue, and moving to virtual doors open. I know many communities have doors open in May, so moving those to online, I think our organizations in our communities, cultural institutions are all ready and willing to support that. So great. So lots of people, looks like everybody's trying to engage citizens the best we can. Thanks.
Okay.
So moving on.
Next up is communicating with staff. It's got its own challenges. We've got different levels of staff and things happening daily. So Sherry, have you set up different mechanisms to communicate with different levels of staff using social media, for example, just emails? As you mentioned, the new normal, working from home. How often are you connecting with staff?
Well, we're trying to stay connected. I think most teams are trying to do a virtual meeting probably 2 to 3 times a week, depending again on the team, especially our full-time staff who are still doing a lot of work from home. So we've been very fortunate. We are a large organization. We've been able to give people the tools they need for the most part to work from home, where working from home is possible. And we've really relied heavily on WebEx as the way to do our virtual meetings. And so there's some licensing involved in getting everyone able to host a WebEx meeting, but we've rolled that out to all of our full-time team so that they can host these virtual meetings. And even for teams that where their staff aren't able to work from home, some of our community center operations staff, some of our part-time staff, we're still trying to do regular touch-ins with them so that everybody's still in the loop as to what's happening. And of course, that whole isolation factor, making sure our people are reaching out to each other and staying in touch. So I'd say that's the biggest part we're doing. So a lot of WebEx.
And Dean, what about you? What are some key messages you're delivering to your staff right now?
Well, smaller communities, we have smaller staff, so it's a little easier for managers to have a more personal contact with their employees. Certainly our CAO is sending out regular emails to all staff to keep them up to date on information and new decisions. We're using Zoom quite actively. We have a daily senior management video conference. I have a daily divisional management video conference, and certainly the managers are in constant verbal communications with staff. In terms of messaging, I think we're trying to highlight the importance of maintaining strong work plans and keeping everyone fully engaged. There's a lot of work to do. At times like this, we're able to get to a lot of things that ordinarily we wouldn't be able to but want to. So the message is
Right.
We're focused on keeping people fully engaged and maintaining operations of the municipality.
Great. So this is another one that we're knowing is happening, is redeploying staff, and that can be both challenging and tricky. What should people be thinking about in terms of messaging to prepare staff for redeployment, make them less anxious? Sherry?
I'll take that one. Sure. Yeah, I think we are, initially we probably thought we were just going to be closed for a couple of weeks, and now as I think we're all seeing that this is looking like it is going to be weeks, if not months longer. And so where these essential services are still operating in our communities, you have to start thinking about the possibility that some of those staff are going to need, or are either going to, go off or need relief. And so starting to look at the skill sets of the staff that are currently not working and in the quote-unquote non-essential, who can support. So some of our operations staff who might work in our community centers could support the park staff that are still, being deployed, and our works operations staff. Where we're working in 311 and our call centers, we have a lot of administrative staff who could potentially back them up. So we're just starting to have conversations about that. We're not at the point of redeployment, The other
Okay.
thing that we've done is we've leveraged a lot of recreation staff to support our emergency operations center. So I'm sure a lot of communities have put their incident management team into play. And recreation has a lot of great organized leaders and support staff. And so a lot of that team is working with emergency management right now.
Okay, what about on the mental health side? Are you providing any support? Is your employee assistant program, you know, being communicated? Is that early times, or what are you doing on that front? Sherry or Dean?
Well, sorry, Sherry, did you want to?
I'm happy to chime in. Sorry, Jennifer, you'll just have to pick one of us and tell us to go, I think. The joy of virtual meetings.
Sure, Dean, how about you take that one?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, the messaging, if I could just take a step back, the messaging to staff, I think, is one of the most important issues that we're facing, and one of the biggest challenges I think we have as a government is understanding what our role is and trying to determine how to keep people working and busy. And I think governments have a unique responsibility to show leadership. Both the federal and provincial governments are keeping their employees employed and busy, and municipalities are trying to do the same thing. So I think that's one of the biggest concerns of employees. All of them have their own, you know, personal experiences and challenges, and many of them have probably have spouses that may have lost jobs. So I think one of the most important things we can do is reassure staff that we're doing our best to keep them employed and keep them active. And I think one of the best ways of keeping them employed is ensuring we have solid work plans in place. And there's a lot of work to be done in the months ahead in terms of doing that type of scenario planning and back to work plans. And I think that helps reassure. I think the Premier recently said that governments should keep their employees working. And I think if we can all work together to ensure that and reassure people, that's going to go a long ways to managing individual stress. Certainly, we always encourage employee assistance programs for additional assistance. I think managers, I've certainly encouraged my team to work very closely with staff. Everyone has unique circumstances and unique responses that we need to provide. So a range of responses.
Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Diane. We've got another poll now around what you're doing in your organization regarding communication.
Yeah, so we wanted to know, what are the biggest challenges you faced in communication? Was it the IT, you know, as you know, maybe your staff don't have phones that they can use, or consistent messaging, and then always the grapevine chatter that happens behind the scenes. So I think those are three of the challenges. If you've had other challenges, please feel free to write them in the chat box. We also want to know what neat ideas maybe your organization is doing in terms of engagement. For us, we started a virtual lunchroom every day at Pro, and it's a chance for staff to connect, and there's only 2 rules. You don't mention the C word, and you don't talk about work generally. And the C word is, of course, COVID-19. So that's something we've done. But we're looking for your ideas. We want to make sure that we're sharing these kinds of great ideas across our membership. Great, thanks everybody. Just going to end the poll. So we are just not quite halfway through our presentation today, so we're mindful that we are already 40 minutes in. We had a little bit of a technical issue right at the beginning, so we're going to just try and be quick so we can get through as much as we can in the next 20 minutes and let people get back to their, what I'm sure are very busy days. Jennifer, back to you.
Right, thanks. So we've got 3 subject areas we're going to try and cover off under continuity planning. It's a huge process for our sector, and we recognize that all of you have different things in your portfolio, everything from marinas to golf courses, culture, tourism, events. So especially when there's so many unknowns, we're going to focus on maintenance and service levels, staffing, and planning for service recovery. So first of all, maintenance and service levels. All organizations normally would be in the process of ramping up for the spring and summer season, but you're now redefining those regular protocols, whether it's maintaining a pool or facility, deciding if and when to plant, how often to mow, whether you're adjusting all your seasonal plans, and assessing how to deploy staff. Dean, in a smaller municipality, what are the key things you're considering when deciding on those current service maintenance levels, and how is it affecting your staffing decisions?
Pretty much all of the above. The biggest challenge, I think, is determining how municipalities fit into the broad range of federal and provincial directives and shutdown. I mean, are we truly supposed to focus on only essential services? Is one of the big questions. And essential services traditionally have been like police, fire, paramedics, treatment plants, etc. Are we supposed to do everything we can to keep all staff at home, or do we carry out important functions in a safe manner? How far are we to go to enforce the closure of recreational facilities? For example, should boat launches remain open, or should we close them? Should boat owners be allowed to work on their boats in our storage compounds when people are being told to stay home? I mean, there's so many different considerations. I mean, we maintain complex HVAC and monitoring systems. We continue to pick up garbage, and with spring coming, we're going to be facing rapidly growing grass, weeds, sinkholes, high water levels, flooding. We also have to decide when or if to open, our marina, our campground, whether we plant flowers and hanging baskets that are already in production. To do many of these things, we also require summer students. So against all this, we must also ensure that our employees are safe and keeping risks to a minimum. And that's influencing the shifts in number of hours that staff work. So the question really becomes, what is that minimum or acceptable level of service? And and what do we want our communities to look like throughout this emergency? And how prepared are we going to be to begin the transition back to a normal state? So there's a lot to consider, and these are all the types of things that are going into our planning for the next few months.
Okay, Sherry, what about in a larger operation? I'm sure, you've got the same kinds of things that Dean just outlined. How are you tackling all the moving pieces?
Sure. I mean, it is evolving quickly. I think all of us would say only a couple of weeks ago we were debating whether we were going to cancel March break programs. And then it quickly evolved into we're shutting down all our facilities, but people are still going to work in them and get some projects done to, okay, everybody go home. And so we have prioritized making sure that we're protecting our assets, and our assets include, our sports fields and our parks and our golf courses. And so we are in a safe way ensuring that when the grass starts growing, we are going to be maintaining it. We're trying to adjust our staffing in our crews to make sure that there is, proper protection, physical distancing, cleaning of vehicles and equipment. So, a lot of thought being put into it, but we want to make sure that when we do come out the other side of this, that, that we're ready to go, and that to the extent we could, we've protected all of these great assets we have. So those are some of the things we've done.
Has your use of PPE changed given what's going on?
Yeah, I'd say that's another thing. Yeah, that's evolved as well. I think it went from, wash your hands, you don't need to do anything that differently, to, okay, if you bring your own, you can wear it, to we're providing it for you. So it's definitely evolved, and, as everyone else, we're having lots of challenges sourcing enough PPE in some cases as well.
Right. And Dean, you know, normally you're sending out crews in one city vehicle, particularly summer seasonal staff. You know, what's physical distancing look like, you know, if you're going to be providing these services with the equipment and infrastructure that you have?
Well, I think it's probably been 2 or 3 weeks, probably more like 3 weeks, where I had instructed my staff to you know, use one person per vehicle. As we are getting busier with the spring, that's going to become a bigger challenge as the workload increases. But we also have a limited number of vehicles. So, I mean, that's something we're going to have to monitor. But
Right.
as we go through and identify all of the, you know, our work plans, we are certainly identifying any areas that might be challenges for people working at a safe distance. Those are also
Right.
the type of discussions that we're having with contractors, especially related to capital projects in terms of, you know, how do we help the economy continue to function? You know, we want to continue to do as many projects with the private sector as we can, but we're also trying to assess, is it worth continuing with different procurement activities? Are private companies capable of doing certain types of work in a safe method? Because we don't want to be perceived as a government in encouraging private companies to avoid safe activities. So those are all
Right.
things we're thinking about.
Oh boy. Okay.
Jennifer, it's Diane. We had a few comments that I just wanted to throw in the chat box right now. You know, for people that use, you know, volunteer groups to do their planting, I think that's going to be something that people will have to really assess how those volunteer groups can safely do the jobs that need to be done. And hiring of summer students, someone's reported they are going ahead with contracts, but no guarantees of hours. So I think there's some different things that we'll see in the chat box. And if anybody has any ideas on what they're doing with their horticultural society or what they're going to do with their plants, period, that might be a good thing to start a discussion on the new Knowledge Hub. Sorry, I just wanted to interject with those few comments before we go on.
No, good point. I've seen the chats, but not all of them.
Yeah.
Okay, staffing, all sorts of topics there. It's top of mind, whether you're managing staff or you might be affected by potential staffing changes. Let's first talk, Sherry, with a unionized environment. How would you characterize union relations at this point?
Well, actually, our Parks and Recreation staff are non-unions, but we do have unions for our other part-time and full-time staff in the city. And I've been dealing with our leadership team on all of that discussion. I would say that the unions right now understand that nobody is wanting to have these conversations and to be in this position, and that there's a little more of an approach of we are all in this together. They don't want their members to be laid off or have a reduction in pay or hours, and frankly, neither does management, but this is the situation we're in. So right. I think there is a fair amount of cooperation right now, but very difficult times.
And I'm sure most organizations are being asked to work through different scenarios and different modeling, specifically on how decisions will be made related to staffing. What are some of the things you're considering when looking at staffing over the next few weeks, perhaps even longer? Dean, I'll ask you first.
Well, I think I've sort of mentioned a lot of those considerations. Again, I think my goal anyways is to, and I think most of our goals is to try to keep people employed, active, and busy. We've got an excellent relationship with our union, a very collaborative environment. But I also think that each challenge creates opportunities, and this situation has certainly allowed us to clean some of our facilities like we've never cleaned before. and also to get to a lot of maintenance and repairs that we've been wanting to. But also when we look at like the lack of program delivery has also provided our programs. We're now working from home with more time to do some of the things that I'd mentioned before that we wouldn't ordinarily get to. So for example, we're really using this time to carefully review some of our master plans for parks, recreation, culture, and reviewing all of the recommendations and determining next steps and how we can get ahead on some of those.
Right.
We're working on records and document management, policies and procedures, researching best practices. I mean, all the things we all want to do. And so that's all being built into our work plans.
Okay. So another area, Sherry, I'll ask you, in order to plan for staff kind of ramping up at the appropriate time when the veil is lifted, as Diane said, you'll need to rehire quickly, especially, for example, highly trained staff like lifeguards. How are you thinking about that? How are you preparing to rehire quickly if, in fact, you're in the position to do that, or you've got, layoffs where you're going to have to bring people back with other kind of contracts?
Yeah, so the timing obviously is not great with all of this because all of us, I think, we're heading into, first March break and then spring session of programs, summer programs, the summer season for temp hiring for parks. So certainly a lot of hiring has been put on hold. I would say there's not a lot of modeling being done at this point in terms of the recovery side, but probably more serious discussion on the layoff side. We've seen lots of layoff announcements for part-time staff in recreation and library across the country in the last week plus. More this week, more to come, I would say. And so it's really just trying to look at that and see how the federal government might support those people if they're laid off. There's been obviously the new program announced, the emergency relief benefit. I think there was some hope that the wage subsidy program, the 75% subsidy, might apply to municipalities, but we've gotten a firm no on that. So I think, the planning is probably more on the side of laying off at this point than it is about rehiring, unfortunately.
Right. Dean, anything to add?
Well, I think, the staff that can work from home are working from home. The parks and facilities staff that are still going into either the workplace or the community, we are, conscious that they're at greater risk than those that are working at home. So we're doing rotating schedules to try to limit the necessity to go back and forth as much as possible. We completed our hiring process for summer students some time ago, and it was about, I think, 2 weeks ago that we sent letters to all of them explaining the current situation and giving them notification that we don't know when or even if we'll be in a position to actually onboard them. But we committed to keeping them informed as we go forward. And so what we're doing as part of both our operational planning and our scenario planning is we're looking at the needs of each department under those different scenarios of ramping up and when we would need different students. And but I mean, at a certain point, if this goes on too long, the transition back to normal operations may be so late that we may not be requiring some or even any of the summer students. So I mean, again, that's something that we're assessing on a weekly basis, and we'll continue to use that to inform our staffing decisions.
Okay. I just want to mention that the implications of layoffs in the sector are significant now and in the future, and both PRO and CPRA are doing proactive messaging around the importance of recreation to quality of life in your community, to staying active and not socially isolated, and the importance of community engagement. So I know that that's top of mind as sort of messaging now and going forward. I'm going to ask Diane, the next and final, I think, area is planning for service redemption. Service resumption. What will the new normal look like and how will we get there? There's lots of things we don't know, but we wanted to end our discussion today on some of the issues around planning when services will resume. Dean, what are you considering in terms of starting up programs? And more specifically, do you think it will be an incremental start or sort of full steam ahead? I mean, I know we can't just sort of turn on a dime, but what is your sort of return to normal look like?
Well, I mean, sort of the scenarios that we're looking at are, are we going to start the transition process in May or June, and how are we going to do that? The next would be sort of July, August, and then the third scenario would be the fall. So we're looking at how best to start ramping up or transitioning back in towards normal state in those different scenarios. But
right.
Regardless of when it happens, realistically, I think there's going to be a great deal of public reluctance to reintegrate into society, and certainly attend large group settings, especially by seniors. So I think the focus will likely be more on on outdoor activities. So we need to consider how we can best facilitate and support that. But I think it's going to be a long transition period.
Jerry, what about for you? Same question. Are you sort of thinking incrementally? Are you doing 2 months out, 4 months out, or sort of trying to do a little bit of everything all at once?
I think the way things have kind of turned recently is that, and I see some of this conversation in the chat box, particularly about large events. I think it's becoming clearer that those types of things are probably not going to be able to happen probably through Canada Day. And then even when we start to head back into recovery, I think things will sort of open up the same way they closed down. I think it will be gradual. I do think there's certain activities that certainly the large festivals and events, it's going to take a long time to get back on track with those, and there'll probably be some very different practices even when we do. But I think on certain other areas, like I think once we reopen our facilities, that if it was in the summer, we'll have the busiest ice season we've ever had. I think on the sports side, there's a lot of interest in getting back to the sports leagues and things like that. It'll be just more some of those other high risk things like the mass gatherings, as Dean said, the older adult programs and centers. I think those are going to take some time to figure out how we can integrate back with those.
Right, and all of this is going to lead to the need for new policy, whether those policies are around, cleaning protocols, the use of PPE, program ratios, physical distancing. Any thoughts on, or what are you doing about some of those things? Are you sort of just tracking what the areas are as you go forward, just to respect that there's going to have to be a new look at the new normal from a policy perspective? Any thoughts on that, Sherry?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is becoming apparent that the way we work and play and even go around our community is probably going to change based on this. So I wouldn't say we have anything specific other than, we have, of course, developed enhanced cleaning standards throughout all of this. And so some of those, I think, will stick for a long time. Which I'm happy about. Hopefully our centers will be cleaner than they ever were before. But I think, definitely we're going to have to see, what the new standards are that come out of all of this for everything, events, programs, facilities, you name it.
Right. What about community partners? We know that, just as an example, we talked about horticultural societies, but community recreation and sport organizations that may also have to try to turn things around. Well, people may not have disposable income, they may not be able to register their children, organizations themselves may need help with finances to allow them to get permits back, etc. Have you started planning with those community partners proactively? Dean, I'll ask you first.
I would say not really, but there are certainly things that are in the back of the mind. You know, I think we've got grant programs already in place to help low-income youth and as well as adults. We work with community organizations on a regular basis to enhance accessibility. So I think those types of relationships and discussions are going to become even more important. So I think we've got the relationships already there that we need to build into the transition plan to engage them early and identify opportunities that we need to pursue. And that may very well be one of the items that we work with the provincial government on in terms of potential funding opportunities as well.
Sherry, anything to add?
Well, I certainly agree. We need to be working with the provincial government, and hopefully we'll see some good funding. As it relates to our community groups, we've heard from lots of them already. You know, sports clubs, I mean, you name it, they've all reached out to kind of say, how is the city going to help us recover from this? So that's going to be a big part of the work that we have to do now, is think about a recovery plan. And the other thing is all these festivals and events that are likely going to be canceled. You know, we, like other municipalities, have a grant program for those events, and so we're just in the process of bringing a report to council in terms of what do we do with the grant funding we gave out for events that are getting canceled. And we know the province has taken the position where they've given grant funding. They're going to allow groups to keep it to cover their costs for canceling, et cetera, and use the money to recover. I think that's where our recommendation is going as well, but there's been a lot of questions from groups about that.
Right. Okay, another thing that's going to be an issue, we recognize the need for affordable access, lots of policy work in that area. Most organizations have some kind of plan in place, which we guess is going to be highly oversubscribed. What may you be thinking about to ensure more low and no cost programs as we resume the new normal and encourage people to come back to our programs and facilities? Sherry?
Well, as Dean said, we already do have some good programs in place. I think a lot of communities do for low income. But yes, I think the demand will be higher, and so it'll really be looking to see how we can add more funding at a time when the whole city is going to be really hit hard financially. So we're really going to need other levels of government to help us if we're going to help the community recover. There's no question about that.
Right.
And that's where PRO can help.
Right. So we provincially, as I mentioned, along with CPRA, are putting together messaging and advocacy to demonstrate the importance of recreation for recovery and community building. Dean, from your experience with the provincial government and now in recreation, can you comment on that? Any advice?
Sure. Well, I spent, I guess, almost 20 years with the Government of Ontario in various capacities, and I've now been at the municipal level for the last 4 years. I had the benefit provincially of working on some of the provincial emergencies back when I was with Community Safety and Correctional Services, working with Emergency Management Ontario. So it's really interesting to be working on a provincial emergency or a national emergency at the municipal level. But I think from my perspective, governments during emergencies are very responsive to needs, and I think we've been seeing that both provincially and federally. Governments respond very well to economics. They also like to do things that are very popular. The sport, recreation, and culture sectors are massive parts of the provincial and national economy, along with tourism, and because of the significant costs of health care, healthy and active lifestyles are also very significant objectives for all governments. So, and I think the fact that the whole country is sequestered at home makes it pretty obvious that we're going to need to start really thinking about the transition period and the mental health of all citizens. And that's where I think municipalities can play a really unique leadership role, but we also need that level of leadership from the federal and provincial governments to allow us to play that. So I think some of the things that are really important moving forward that PRO, I think, is already doing, but can certainly continue to do, is focus on the higher level of governance, making it really clear that making it clear on what the municipal roles should be. Collaborating at all levels to make it clear to everyone what our role is, especially moving forward. And that's, I think, really important in terms of as we get into the transition. I think what we've seen over the last few weeks is municipalities not knowing exactly what we should be doing, especially after the colleges were closed. One by one, municipalities started making decisions. And I think for the transition back, it's really going to be important to send the message to particularly the provincial government, I think, in terms of providing clear direction on how all municipalities consistently move towards that transition period.
Right.
I think that's paramount. And also, I think being very specific on funding or other types of activities and programs that we're asking the government to support. And that means organizations like PRO and AMO and others all working very collaboratively to try to identify the specific priorities for municipalities so that the messaging is going forward to a whole bunch of different ministries that can then take it up to the Premier's office.
Perfect. Okay. So everyone, we have one more poll. It's actually bringing us to a close on this first webinar. And the poll is going to ask you about future topics to continue engagement. So I'll pass it back to Diane.
Thank you, Jennifer. Pardon me. And we did have to clear the chat box because we had reached our limit in terms of comments, but be assured that I have saved it. There was a tremendous amount of discussion just over the last couple of minutes about when people are closing, what they're closing, how they're dealing with permits, and sort of I think I can't really generalize about a general consensus, but most it's May, mid-June, and I think Dean, you mentioned that we can't just turn the lights on and run programs overnight. So what are we looking at, and how do we set up a registration time? And so I think certainly the City of Toronto took the stance this week of canceling all events till the end of June. I think that was to take the pressure off those large events like Pride and the Jazz Festival, so that they're not making those calls, so that the city is doing that. I think that's a responsible thing for governments to do in this case. That's much my opinion. Some great discussion, and if you have any more questions that you want to pop into the chat box, now is the time to do so. We will hopefully be able to do some more webinars. We learned a lot today, so I really do thank everyone for your patience. We did have to make some adjustments sort of midstream, and so I think, again, I thank everybody who participated today, and I'm going to hand it back to Kathy just to end us off.
Great. Thanks, Diane, and I'm hopeful that this time you can
Hooray.
hear me. I have not been accidentally muted, but I know that I speak on behalf of the Board of Directors, and in particular our Chair, Jan Wilson, when we say thank you to everybody who has taken the time to be on the call. We We know that you're facing difficult circumstances. We know that you're balancing family and home life and work life, and so the stress is significant. But I do want to thank Jennifer for moderating today's call, and of course our panelists, Dean and Sherry, for taking time out of your very busy schedule to engage us in conversation and help move us forward. We did experience some glitches, but our goal is that we will be doing more webinars moving into the future. We know that there's going to be a new normal that will come at the end of this, and Parks and Recreation will definitely play a vital role in recovering planning. I am so encouraged and heartened to hear of all of the different things that you're doing. We've seen lots of questions in the chat boxes. We've had lots of ideas that have been shared, and lots of decisions that have been made and are going to have to be made as we move forward and as we plan for service resumption. So we will, our goal will be to plan very quickly to have our next webinar. Glad to see that there are so many ideas that people are interested in. And as Jennifer noted and our panelists have noted, we are working very closely with the provincial government and CPRA in our plan for recovery. And so we will continue to keep you apprised of all of those activities as we do work in collaboration with each other and work closely with government. So thank you again, and Diane, a huge thanks to you for your usual ability to be unflappable in any circumstances, and we'll see you all soon again on our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
Kathy. Thanks to our presenters, and you can always